we are ranking every pre-dungeon quest from Tears of the Kingdom to hopefully distract you from the fact that we still can't pet dogs. Coming in at number 5 is the quest to the Fire Temple. While I appreciate this storyline having a more comedic tone with Gorons getting drugged up by gloom-infested marbled rock roast, it was still the most underwhelming of the bunch. I like that we got to battle Yunobo, who's doing his best luchador cosplay, but the fight was over before it even started. The ascent up to Death Mountain was literally no different than if I had done it outside the quest, although apparently you can take minecarts up instead of climbing like I did. We are then brought to yet another cool but criminally short boss fight at the top of Death Mountain using a flying vehicle. The last section has a bit of spectacle jumping into Death Mountain, but from there it's a fairly mundane trip up to the temple. At number 4, I have to go with the Water Temple. This was a big step up from the Fire Temple quest, but the competition gets a lot tougher between this and the other pre-dungeon quests from here on out. The beginning part starts a little slow, it amounts to being fetch quest busy work, getting the clues on the tablet, and finding King Dorephan. I will fully admit though that the floating scale island had me stumped. I was not at all looking at the debris to find the water droplet that I had to shoot the scale into. The sludge-like is barely a mini-boss, but I did hear from some people that they had trouble with this thing, but it probably helped for me that this was the last dungeon I did, so I was pretty stacked on equipment. The waterworks was one of the coolest parts of the quest and really showed us what could have been, but I'll save that rant for the dungeon ranking. It had been so long since we had a Zelda water level puzzle that I actually found myself missing them. After opening the way to the dungeon, I found a little annoying that I had to go back and get the Zora armor, but thankfully it's not too much work to get. The ascent up is pretty fun with the low gravity and the introduction of water bubbles that we have to move between to reach what some might call a dungeon at the top. The Lightning Temple comes next, which might come as a surprise to some people, but if we were just talking pre-dungeon quest, I think the number 3 spot is about right for me. I enjoyed the introduction of the new enemies, the Gibdo, but the execution of the pre-dungeon quest had a few moments that felt undercooked. Meeting up with Riju to learn the new lightning ability was cool, and I did enjoy immediately putting it to practice defending Karakara Bazaar against the Gibdo invasion. Following that is where I had issues. They have this big build-up to defending Gerudo Town, and you are told that defenses need to be set up and you need to choose where to put them and where to station troops. I was prepared for this full-on Gibdo invasion. What we got was pretty underwhelming. Literally one wave of Gibdo from each side and that was it. I don't even think there was any point to setting up defenses or troops because you could take out the hives so quickly. The next section is definitely more interesting, where a series of mirrors need to be aligned to create a triangle. This summons a conductor, which makes the dungeon rise. This reminded me a lot of the Tower of the God sequence from Wind Waker, which I appreciated. We cap things off with our first encounter with Queen Gibdo, a fun and formidable boss who is a preview of what's to come. My number 2 pick is the quest up to the Construct Factory / Spirit Temple. The experience may vary for some on this one because if you find it early, you may not get the full effect. I think one thing that elevates this pre-dungeon quest so high for me is that it was the most unexpected. If you played Breath of the Wild, you kinda knew you were in for something similar with each of the 4 races you interact with in this game. I wasn't even sure there was going to be a 5th dungeon after completing the other 4, so everything felt like a treat. This was like a quest right out of Indiana Jones. I loved exploring the hidden mysteries within the Zonai ruins and using the charge set to clear the obscure islands above. The Thunderhead Islands was probably the best part of the Sky Islands, aside from maybe the Great Sky Island that you start out at. It's so cool to grab the Construct Head and use that as a guide to find the Construct Factory deep within the depths. The sheer mystery of this pre-dungeon quest carries this one, as I felt like with the other dungeons I pretty much knew what to expect going in. At number 1 we have the Wind Temple. Some might find this surprising as it's the first dungeon many people do and the simplest one, but man it's impressive. Climbing the mountain and going through a cave to meet up with Tulin at the beginning isn't anything too special, but the quest is incredible the rest of the way. It's just a long ascent all the way up to the dungeon. You keep scaling higher and higher around the storm. It's so much fun using these airship trampolines along with Tulin's ability to make it to each next platform. I found myself amazed every few minutes that I was still going up and I hadn't reached the top yet. It truly shows off the verticality of this game. Finally, after forging through this chaotic storm, you make it to the top and it's all peaceful and quiet, and you know there's only one thing left to do, and that's jump into the eye of the storm right into the dungeon. It's simple, but pure perfection. Thank you for watching, and let me know how you would rank each pre-dungeon quest in Tears of the Kingdom.